Hey guys, welcome to my channel. First video, please be easy on me. So today I'm just going to be recreating my Smokey Techno Lavender Eyeshadow look that I had posted to the Instagram blog, got a few requests, so let's dive right in. So with any look, I would definitely start out with your eyebrow. Now for me, hold on, gotta turn on the beauty light. For me, I'm not actually going to be doing a full brow for this. I'll actually just be using whatever's left over in my eyebrow spoolie. I have extremely light brows, as you can tell, so I just want to make sure that I'm actually able to go in and add a little bit of a tint. I don't want to have super full done brows for this, so I'm just going to do that real quick over here off to the side. And typically on my spoolie, I use this to comb out any time that I use a pencil. So I'll typically have shades like this little Givenchy dude, it's like a little strawberry blonde dude. So like I'll typically have like that shade in here left over, or sometimes I'll also use this Makeup Forever Total Taupe as well. So sometimes I'll have either one of those shades already kind of like caked in this from previous makeup looks that I've done. So that's what I'm literally just like gently brushing out into my brow. There's nothing actively in this. And again, I just want, because I have super ridiculously light brows, I just want to have a little bit more dimension to them, so it's not just eyeshadow look and oh my god, where'd they go? So that's just what I'm doing right now. If my own damn hair would get out of my spoolie. So I'm just going to continue to do that on the other side now. And then once I'm done with this, we're going to jump right into doing an eyeshadow base. And the biggest thing about a base, I will say, is that to each their own, first off. But I primarily like to do things that are tinted, especially because, as you may be able to see, I have very veiny, almost like translucent type lids. So I like to really just have almost like a more like skin tone-esque flat base. I don't mean flat as in just like non-flat color, but truly just like a wash of color, so that's easy. I don't have necessarily all these lovelies poking through. So let me just wrap up this real quick. And again, this for me is just a very sheer wash of color on my brows. I'm not trying to get a super well done defined brow for this. So a smidge better. You can see them on my face. Many of you may have actual brunette brows. Totally cool for you, honestly. If you have sparsity, I would definitely go in, let's say, I don't have it out here, but I would definitely go in, let's say, with like a brow flick pen and just like fill in some of the bald spots, doing like flick motions to act as if they're actual eyebrow hairs. Or if you have perfect brows that you're content with and don't want to do any filler work, I would say just using a clear brow gel, just like set them in place and have a good nice shape to them. That's it. Super easy for this look. So diving into eyeshadow base. So I tend to use MAC's Pro Longwear Paint Pot and Painterly. Again, pasty AF. So I've used this since high school, so it's more of a familiarity for me. But I do tend to use it with more of like a buffing brush. WTF, where did I put that brush? No. Oh, right in front of my face. So I tend to use like a bigger kind of like buffing brush just to like really get it in there and have it look pretty natural. So you'll see I literally go in and then I literally paint it on. And I'm just doing some nice buffing work on the outs, especially where I have my veins. So you see it's just a bit more of a sheer wash of color. It's definitely put a damper on some of the, sorry, I don't know why I did this. This is more for comparison. This doesn't have it, this does. And so this just has a whole lot less veins showing through. And plus, since it's literally, I'm filming this in the morning, I just did my face routine, and my face routine definitely involves some oils. So with that, we're going to be going over this with some loose powder, just to make sure that we set it in place, because if you're applying eyeshadows, which obviously are powders, over an oily base, they're going to look patchy. It's going to be really hard to blend, so we're just going to do it all with powder. So again, just doing this over here. Does not have to be super perfect, because again, this is pretty much in your skin tone, or at least mine is. But if you're using, obviously I would not advise doing a color base for this since it is a pretty light look. I would do something if you have like, don't do anything that's truly a white base. I tend to use those if you're using colors that you want like really big impact, like any rainbow colors or anything, but this is going to be on the softer side, so I definitely advise doing something that's more on the translucent side if you don't want it or don't have something that is more in the actual skin tone family. Okay. So from there, we're going to take a loose powder with another super fluffy brush, and yes, this one is dirty. I've been using it for quite a few. You're seeing even the powder come off of it. I just tend to use this for all of the eyeshadow bases. I wash this guy maybe every 2-3 looks. Every other brush, for the most part, I'll wash in between each look depending on what colors I'm using it with, but regardless. So again, already has powder on it. And I tend to get really oily lids, so that's honestly why I'm going in and doing it this way. I've always had oily lids my entire life, so like while cream eyeshadows always crease no matter what, that's just the nature of them being cream. I also have powder eyeshadows crease on me as well because again, I have really oily lids. So just to make sure and put in any type of measure I can to prevent the creasing. So once I do the base, then I actually apply this loose powder, and you can do it with any loose powder or setting powder you have. Totally does not need to be brand specific. Whatever you got going on, whatever you typically use for your complexion, totally cool to use that. Hell, even when I was first doing makeup, like back in high school / middle school, oh my god, I had girls using baby powder. Now, you can, I don't advise it, but you can. Yeah, anything that's really going to be oil absorbing is the biggest thing. And the biggest reason I don't advise it is really, I can't handle fragrance and things. Like even this is fragrance free. So, diving right in. Actual eyeshadow. So we're going to do face at the end. It's just easier that way, and it's much easier in terms of cleaning up any type of fallout that may happen. I don't think it will, but in case it does, it's a lot easier to clean up once you don't have your whole complexion on. So we're going to start actually with eyes. So with eyes, you should always be doing something as almost like a eyeshadow base that'll help with the actual transition shade, or rather it will be your transition shade, but it'll also be way easier to do a true blend. It'll provide a little bit more slippage. So with that, we are going to be doing, oh, that's glitter. 1 second. So we're going to use just a typical eyeshadow brush here. And today we're using the Pat McGrath Subliminal 1, I think, or Mothership 1 Subliminal palette, whatever. But it's this beautiful dude right here. And so for right now, just as the base, we're going to be using this really cute taupe. So truly, you're going to do you're going to be doing a full actual eye sweep of color, especially over in the crease, because at the end of the day, we do want to make sure that we're creating some shadow. You see that here? There's already some difference happening between here and here. Okay. Just turn up the light, so maybe you'll be able to see this a bit better. So, turn this light up too. Might be a little blinding for you, but you can see probably. So here we're just trying to tuck it into the crease to actually complement your eye shape. And we're just going gentle back and forth motion. And again, you're not having a super duper ton of product on your brush, just enough to be able to blend and create a really soft, like airbrushy kind of look. So yeah, we're just going to be doing this back and forth, kind of bringing it throughout your crease. Just kind of bringing it down a bit more. See, and there we go. We have a general smoky shape right there. Very general. You're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So in total, from this palette, we will be using 4 shades. Now again, you can always find dupes for things, of course. This was just a lot of fun. And I try to sometimes just use one palette to create looks. At the end of the day, you have the palette. Might as well try and get creative. With this one, I am using the same palette for the full look, not going elsewhere. So, well, I'm even feeling some like gripping. If you do feel gripping, that's when I would definitely grab some more setting powder just to have a little bit more of a dusting, because you might have missed some spots where the oil from your natural skin was peeking through some of the eyeshadow base. So do just keep that in mind. Don't be shy. You definitely can reapply some of the setting powder just to have a little bit more slippage for your eyeshadow brushes. So just do keep that in mind. All right, so yep, you see there, general shape. I will say my particular eyes are not even shaped, which is so annoying. So you'll notice that while we like to think all faces are symmetrical, we might have some abnormalities about our faces. So totally cool. Just do your best to try and just like stare dead on into your mirror and actually see and determine like as much symmetry as possible. Very cool. And then even though we have not actually done anything underneath, we will be pulling some color underneath. Just be mindful of that. In fact, I keep losing the damn brush. Ah, here we go. Keep misplacing it. Keeps looking like other ones. So right now all I'm doing is actually taking the same brush that I was using as with the Painterly and adding a bit more to my lower lash line, just because we will be putting some shadows on the lower lash line. So just want to make sure that we're prepping that area appropriately to basically have color or have shadows. So I will say I'm not going to go as gung-ho on powdering this area, mainly because once you put powder here, it gets really awkward texture-wise once you put other cream or liquid things over it, which we will be doing with concealer and foundation. So don't actually powder under your eyes. Just words of wise. Yes, what I'm doing right now is genuinely mixing cream and powder, but when you do it over, it's different. When you play with it, you'll have a better frame of reference for what I'm talking about, but like it is different. So, anywho, we are there. Definitely need some tea. Okay. Still, next up, we will be doing a little bit more of the actual shadow portion, like building out the shadow. So I always like to really associate makeup with art class. I don't know if you ever were in art class or drawing 101, but when it comes to actually adding depth and creating shape, you do need the difference between light and dark, shadow and highlight. So we just added a sheer wash. I'm not even going to go there in terms of shadow. Sure, it is a light shadow, but we're going to create an even darker shadow. Looking for the brush. We're going to do an even darker shadow with this beautiful matte dude. So just, this was like the medium taupey gloriousness. Then there's one shade darker right next to it. So we're going to do that bad boy pretty much along the lower lash line and in the crease, just to really create that shadow. And I always like to do things along the lash line, mainly because it emphasizes your lashes and it actually makes your lash line or lashes look fuller when they may not be. So, very, very lightly, again, if you want to, the biggest thing here is making sure that you have a very light amount of product on the tip of your brush, because you can always add more, but taking away makeup is such a bitch. It is not easy. So there are obviously tips and tricks to do it, but just make it easier on yourself and go gradually versus going really gung-ho and then being stuck with having to take it away. It's not nearly as enjoyable, and it ends up becoming a grueling process if you have to do it repeatedly. So again, I would just make sure you are gradually adding color and then building on it versus being stuck with having to take it away. Word to the wise, that's all. Okay, and then there we are, just like buffing it into the outside of the lower lash line as well. So The biggest thing here is that you're making a fully connected kind of shape. So see, here is just the wash of color, and then here we actually started to do the darker color and then bringing it down. So again, just very much complementing your natural eye shape and keeping it very close to the lash line. But yeah, we're just going to be continuing that again on the other eye. And do keep, one thing I did mean to mention, and I apologize for not at the start, do try to keep, if you have an extra one, a spare, totally clean buffing brush. It really will come in handy in terms of, pretty clean. So do try to always keep a naked brush on hand. That way it'll be your helper in terms of blending and buffing things together as you go. The last thing you want is to pick up something that already has color in it that you've used earlier in the look and just maybe you forgot or what have you, but to be using it, all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, I'm depositing color I didn't even know was in the brush. You don't want any surprises. You really just want to make sure that you are going in and using the naked brush as your helper and really like your cleaner upper kind of thing. So do just keep that in mind whenever you do a look with multiple different shades. It's best to have one just to use as your friend in blending. Let's zoom out a wee bit more. So we're gonna again just recreate that same thing on the other side. And one thing, if you're not comfortable with doing this while upright, I know a few friends are really concerned about actual fallout from darker shades. Again, this is the beauty of why I try to teach without actually having a base on just yet. Especially, I'm assuming if you're watching me, you might be make a beginner, you might just be interested in how to do this look. But regardless of your skill level, sometimes it is just easier when working with darker shadows to do complexion last. So that's why I'm doing it today. But if you decided to do it first, totally cool. If you are, just know to be obviously super careful with any fallout because then it can be a bear to actually pick up afterwards. So what you just heard is me tapping off any excess that might be on the brush. But again, just making sure you're dabbing it along your lash lines and going up into the crease. And you'll see this side, I noticed it before and I did not go back in and powder it. I said to and I didn't, and I should have. But I can definitely see it's depositing a bit more patchy over here than it did over here. So, following my own advice, going back in with some powder just to make sure that all of the excess oil on my lid is absorbed. Let's see. Oh, sorry, but what I was saying, if you do decide to do the darker shadows over your complexion, then I would just say, my rule of thumb is always to like kind of hunch yourself over and look down. That way if you do have any fallout, it's not actually falling directly onto your cheek, whereas like if you were doing it upright and like literally doing it and then it's truly falling down onto your cheek. Instead, literally like try and like look over a mirror, and then that way it might fall on the mirror, but it's not falling on your skin, so it's not going to ruin the look. So just, you can come up with your own tips and tricks as you go, obviously, but that's an easy one to follow at times. Okay, so just making sure even and continually, like, you can always look like truly like back and forth. Like as you're doing it, you're just like subtly checking yourself, basically, like back and forth between the two eyes, just ensuring even and uniformity. And then even there, I honestly can't even remember if I did the other eye underneath with Painterly, so we're doing it again. Now I will say for some of this, you will need a makeup setting spray, or at least a spray with glycerin in it. So do keep that in mind as we're about to proceed to the next step. It's best if you do have something like that on hand. I'm gonna grab MAC's Fix Plus. I will say if you have sensitive eyes like me, it's not the best, purely because of the fragrance, but it does a wonderful job in terms of performance and look. Just be weary of the fragrance. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, especially using it around your eyes. It's not the best, but it looks great, so yeah. Pause. So we're now at a point where we have the matte shades down. So we have the lighter taupe, the darker taupe in the crease, and like the actual shape. So you do see the general shape that we're going with. Now, we're into the actual fun shades. So in the palette, we will be using the beautiful, like metallic, pearly, smoky lavender shade right here next to the matte. You know, I think it's just a really dark charcoal or a dark ebony. It's not like a true black, which was also really fun to play with in other looks. But regardless, so beautiful metallic lavender here. And then we're also going to be using, at another point down the road in this look, we will also be using this beautiful shape-shifty one. It looks pink, but then the actual shift is a beautiful blue. Like, check it out in the mirror. You can see the reflection down below. Like, it has a lot of pinkiness in the base, but the actual shift is blue. It's beautiful. Anyway, so those are the actual two fun shades. So again, if you can find dupes, by all means, have at it. I just got the palette. So, in terms of wetting the brush, so like I had mentioned before, I am going to be using Max Fit Plus. Now, the biggest reason I'm using it, quite frankly, I'm in the process of low buy 2020 / I just started this year with the whole like concept of panning. So, I mean, to be fair, I'm pretty far down into it. I haven't been using it too much in the past year in terms of like the use I'm about to do right now with you guys, but it's been more of like an overall, an overall actual setting spray that I've been using it as. But I just want to use it up because, quite frankly, the fragrance kills my eyes. You're gonna see, just watch. But again, the performance is fantastic. So sometimes I guess I am willing to suffer for beauty. Not always, sometimes. So, determining how to do this and not ruin my dining set. Okay, so, yes, not the dining room table. So, brush, and now I'm doing this, you can see there. It's a flat brush. It's like a very traditional eyeshadow brush, but I like how skinny it is. This is just a Wet n Wild one, but like I love how skinny it is because it's perfect to actually use as a very like pointed but not pointy tip, and it's very concentrated. So anyway, for this, literally just missed it, kind of wave it off. Honestly, I even was using it on the back of my hand as just like gets a lot of the excess off. Yes, it still has product from the last time I did this earlier last week. Okay, anyway, so turning my other beauty light on again, grabbing my mirror. So with the actual metallic lavender, pick some up on your brush, as so, and we're gonna actually basically paint the inner corner because again, it is going to be where some of the reflection is. So we're gonna be focusing the metallic lavender shade on the inner corner, just as so, and kind of using it to trace along the inner, I'd say quarter of your lash line. And again, kind of tracing the shape of your eye upward and doing it there too. So it's almost like you're kind of creating this like fanned out V with the metallic, just so it again is there to define the eye and add a little bit of purple and add some like, ooh, interest. So again, we just did that on the inner corner. I did it on my right eye, and you can kind of see there. We're gonna do it again. I'm not gonna re-wet my brush because it already is still pretty damp, but I went in again for more color. And we're gonna do it on the outer side as well. So we're gonna do it same eye. Again, following the shape that we just created with the matte shades and just really going over it. Because again, we're gonna use a non-wet brush in a hot minute to also buff this out so that we have a little bit more like a lavender tone overall. So, but one thing, the biggest reason the other metallic or the other shapeshift showed up the most in the look on Instagram, make sure you're leaving a bit of naked, it's not going to be naked because of the matte shade underneath, but still make sure you're leaving like some naked or negative space with the lilac, so, or lavender. So make sure you're doing it like pretty much emphasizing this inner corner and this outer, but don't go all over, and make sure you're leaving some hollow in the middle. You'll thank me at the end for the look. So again, continuing here, because sometimes if the brush is drying off, it won't pick up as much. But yep, just again, making sure you're going over it. And then we're gonna go a little bit on the lower lash line. So you're gonna see I do some really funny face shapes, as many of us do, to actually get to the contours of our eyes. So here, again, I'm using pretty much like the tip as if it were almost like a pencil brush, so to speak. So I'm doing that underneath. Now I will say, obviously, because we didn't do complexion yet, do know that you will probably have to go over it a little bit just to make sure there's no disconnect in the look. I'm going to walk you through all of that. But also keep in mind, if you did decide to use a fragrance setting spray like I did, right about now is when you're going to start to get some eye irritation like I just did. So bear with me. But that aside, you'll start to see, especially depending on your lighting, you're really going to start to admire and just see this overall like ethereal lavender gorgeousness start to come out every time you like kind of shift. Obviously not yet on the other eye if you haven't done it yet, but it really starts to add some softness with the shimmer. Again, that's why we started out with the matte shades, because you're just going to be really building up that shadow, the shape overall with those shades. And then, again, just getting all the excess liquid out on the back of my hand, just so it is truly a bit damp, not wet. And I'm going back into the lavender shade. But yeah, so that's why you tend to start with the matte shades, because it adds that baseline shadow already. And then you're adding in the fun, the metallic, the shape shift. I don't know why I keep saying shape shift, but color shift kind of shades as a fun accent to those. But your shape and the actual effect of the eye is already pretty much there. So now you're just kind of adding in like the fun accents. So doing the exact same thing on the other eye now, because you'll see already this has a little bit more pizzazz than this one does. So, fungal, it totally might have added too much water to the brush, which if that happens to you as well, you'll start to notice that as you use it, it just might look more translucent than the other side. Not a problem. You'll just go in again with other shadow, or again a few more times with it. But like right now I'm noticing that my left eye is starting to look a little bit more springy and not as like rocker punk. It's a little bit more sheer wash of lavender. Very pretty, but it's not quite the effect I'm going for. I'm all for pretty girliness, but I really like funky, grungy looks more. Not the biggest girly girl, I'll say that. But, so yeah, I don't know if you can actually see just yet, but this one is definitely a bit more, I wouldn't say opaque in terms of color, but a bit more metallic, is like matted in, whereas this one I'm a bit more satisfied with the actual smokiness that this lends in. I'll fix that. But just in case you could actually see it in the camera. So just like I had done with the other one, going in again on the outside. Again, making sure that you do keep a little hollow, non-metallic section in the middle. And again, really loving that lash line. And again, making funny faces to get to the lower lash line. Now I tend to do, on my lower lash line, I do tend to do the metallic more towards the center, because that's the most likely place where it'll actually, the metallic will actually pick up light in like a normal conversation setting, I guess you could say. Not that we're having too many of those with people outside our household at the moment, but versus doing it on the outside, I tend to like to keep the outside, unless it's a full-blown, really over-the-top metallic look, I like to keep the outside more matte, again, because it adds to the shadow and depth that you're trying to create. And again, the metallic will pick up light, so it'll almost, depending on the movement, it won't act as a highlight, but it'll act as an accent. So it'll definitely attract the human eye to that area, which is why I tend to use matte on the outer, just again, because I want it to create the depth and kind of sink in, like, again, the purpose of a shadow is to push and push back. So that's why I tend to do that. But If you would like to see how it looks, by all means, use it wherever you would like. But that is definitely where I would recommend, is not going all the way around. And then also, I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, on the lower lash line, also make sure you are leaving a little bit of space towards the inner. So like I've been doing, in terms of the bottom, I've been doing, let's see, like a third over here was the matte, and then I pretty much like did this middle third to be the metallic lavender. Leave this like quarter to a third bare right here. You're gonna be using the shade, the shifting shade. Okay, very cool. So I'm just gonna, again, go over that little bit because I had added a little too much setting spray, so it was a little sheerer than I had wanted. Making sure that they're even on both sides. Okay, so for the most part, here you are. Let's actually move this over here, maybe you can see it a little better. So here we are. Now yes, there's definitely opportunities still to make it even more even. Again, we're just laying down the color right now. So I am gonna go back in with my, with my naked buffer, the helper that I had mentioned earlier, and just make sure you're blending a little up into the crease. I just wanna make sure there's no disconnect between the lavender. Not that I think there's gonna be a disconnect at this portion or this portion, it's more the outside where we had laid it over the matte. I'm always a little cautious and concerned, wanting to make sure that there's always connection. So I have another spare bullet brush on the side. I'm gonna just dip that ever so gently into the lavender and just make sure. Now this was not a wet brush. I'm totally using this dry. But yeah, sometimes you just need to punch it up a little bit after you've done that. So just adding that into the outer corners. Okay, now we are getting ready for the fun stuff. Alright, so before we get to like the full fun stuff, meaning the shifting shade, I do just want to make sure we do the complexion. So what I like to do, first off, because again, super sensitive skin, I use actual Juice Beauty Serum foundation. I've used it for a few years now. Use whatever foundation you may have. I used to use, and I shouldn't say used to, I still do, but with this particular foundation, I found that using a beauty blender was making it a little cakey. I think it's more just like the actual texture of the foundation. You'll see what I mean in a sec. But anywho, so I use a brush now. Feel free to use whatever you would like, whatever you typically do, and have your setting powder on hand. We will need to set certain spots. So going right in, and per usual, making sure you always blend outward when it comes to complexion things. So starting at the nose. Okay, now that's all done. I did not end up using concealer, I will say. I only use foundation for everything. Just in this look in particular. Sometimes I do use concealer. Kind of all depends on my mood and the overall look I'm going for. But this one, I don't want it to look super perfect. I like sometimes adding a bit more texture, your own skin tone to it, your pores, your imperfections. Like, we're all human, you know? So with this, I just used foundation. I did not use concealer at all. Feel free, do what you normally do. But with this, I am actually going to now powder underneath my eyes. I know I had said don't do it before. That's because it would have, if you did, you may have experienced this, but if you didn't, just word to the wise, what you may experience next time in case you forget is if you do powder, like actually underneath, like with setting powder, powder under your eyes prior to doing foundation, sometimes you may notice it'll all of a sudden start to cake and like get really funky patches of cakiness. It's because the liquid foundation or cream foundation, whatever, is actually interacting with the powder that underneath. They don't typically mix well, so just word to the wise. If you don't and it tends to work for you, awesome, keep doing your thing. I've just noticed that, so I tend to not, and I like to forewarn others in case they're not familiar with that. So right now, going in, powdering under my eyes. Yes, it's gonna look all sorts of crazy, totally fine. I'm gonna buff that out later anyway. But just making sure I have a nice bit of matte skin to play with powder on top of for the remainder of the look underneath. And then I'm just gonna powder it in any old area I tend to get really oily, which is definitely around my nose, down my nose, on the chin, and at the top of my brow bone, so like here-ish. Okay, so we're gonna hold off on doing any of other complexion until a little bit later because I wanna make sure we get the eye look done. So, putting that aside for now comes the fun stuff. So, we just did lavender, complexion. We're kind of good for now-ish. So, we are now going to go back, wet that same brush, but this time, we're gonna focus on, again, making the connection between this, but then we're also gonna go into the fun look, or the fun shade shifter. So, because I'm sick of doing it on my hand, and I'm starting to get a lot of metallic pigment on the back of my hand, we are now going to go in, again, grabbing more of the lavender to actually reconnect the look. Also have on hand the other brushes you may have used for the mattes, because again, you're gonna wanna build up and kind of make the whole look connected now that you have your foundation on. So again, sure, if you want to do another pass on where you've already done, I tend to, just out of paranoia and wanting to just like keep building in a particular area. So I'm gonna do that. I'm going right back in, and again, it's also a way for you to make a little bit more definition, like if you want to really only emphasize on the inner corner where you want it to like pretty much do a cut. That's what I end up going in for too, to like really redefine that. Don't worry, if you're noticing, like I am right now, that this center is lighter than this center, that's fine. You're gonna be covering it anyway with the shade shifter, so it's not super duper critical. I'm already getting back into the habit of hunching over a mirror, which is not fair to you guys because then I'm not on camera, so I'll try and be more upright when I slump. But seriously, the biggest reason I even do this, again, is just for fallout. So that way it doesn't hit my cheek. Because seriously, it's not fun. There are ways to do it, and I'm happy to talk about those. It's just really pain in the butt to do. Because then you take up sometimes more layers than you need to, and then you're like having to work to fix the little like gap that was created. That's not fun. This again is just the other bullet brush that I had used for the darker matte shade, so going in over the corners again, just to make sure everything's connected. Okay, now, fun time. So, same brush. I would definitely advise paper towel, wiping it as best as you can. Then wetting it again. Going in, you'll see, or you do see, let me see if this will help. You do see the like little naked, quote unquote, negative space patches in between the lavender. That's what we're going in with this beautiful pinky bluish shapeshifter thing now. So, just wet it. I'm just going in, coated both sides of the brush. So now we are going to paint it into the center right there. And from your view, you might be like, wait, it doesn't really look like much. Oh, don't worry. It's gonna look like a whole lot in a bit. Because right now, when you wet it and you're putting it down, yeah, it'll be a beautiful little soft thing. But then when we go back over it with dry, it's gonna be a whole glittery thing. So it's gonna be fun. Because when you're doing the wet, it totally changes the look of a shadow on the skin. That's kind of the fun of playing with wet and dry. Ooh, the light just caught that and I got the beautiful, like almost oil slick look. Like, oh, that's so cool. I love Pat McGrath's stuff. She's so talented. Obviously, she's legendary, but still, I know, I got a fangirl a little bit. It's just so pretty. Anyway, so we are now covered on both eyes in that little negative space. Now we're going to go back in, again, same brush, not re-wetting, but we are going to go back in and get it more on the tip, so that way, again, you can do that little inner corner bit. So, now do make sure that even though you didn't re-wet the brush, do make sure that the brush is somewhat damp. That way it still is picking up the pigment as you're expecting, and it's not going to be all powdery and flaky, because that will have a different effect. You're going to also use the Pigmenty, but just know that it's not going to be the same effect as what I'm doing right now. Not gonna lie, guys, I'm kind of impressed by how well my eyes are doing. The first time I did this look, oh my god, I kept having to pause and literally just be like, okay, oh my god, because it was stinging so bad. It's not that bad right now. I know, watch, I said that and I'm gonna end up crying by the end. If anybody has any recommendations for fragrance-free setting sprays, please leave it in the comments. I'm really desperately looking for one. I want to finish this just for the sake of finishing it. I know that's stupid if it's causing me pain, but still, it's the buying principle. So if you could just please be oh so kind and leave any recommendations in the comments. Or if you happen to know of any actual DIY, like how to make your own setting spray that can be fragrance free, super game for that too. Please let me know if you find any amazing ones that have helped you. Definitely am interested in making my own as well. So, as you're doing this, I'm sure you can tell you're seeing some beautiful ethereal glow starting. So, welcome to Smoky Techno Lavender. This is by far one of the more fun looks I've done in a while. I've been I've been going through my palettes, trying to challenge myself to like stick with the same palette for at least a week and do a few different looks. And this was by far one of my favorites. So yep, as you're going into that inner third, just make sure you are actually like continuing the look up into the little inner corner. So it's not just like right there, but you're actually continuing it up around the little inside crevice. Okay, very cool. So that's it for the actual dry portion. However, where the F is it? I do have, So now we're gonna start to do the actual like fan out, so to speak, of the actual fun stuff. So another standard eyeshadow brush, going right back in, don't wet it, going right back into the color shift. Just got a little light dusting. So this is gonna help be the connection point as we actually kind of make this smokiness a little more of the fun shift as you move your head. So make sure you're getting it towards the brow bone. With this look, I did not use a highlight at all. I kind of used this shade almost like as its own highlight, since it's so stunning in like the best subtle way possible. But yeah, so for this, I didn't bother doing anything like up here or even on cheeks, which we'll get to cheeks in a hot minute. But with this, I wanted to just make sure that anytime I shifted or moved my brow bone, that you would see that. So this kind of acts as the highlight. So there, you'll see now, so you'll see now that color shift versus no color shift. So we're gonna recreate that now on this side. And again, you're starting pretty much like once your brow bone starts to kind of like go out, that's where I'm kind of hitting that and going up. So it's kind of like I'm fanning out the smoke from the matte shades and making it seem as if it continues with this, but then once it does and you turn, you're like, oh snap, oh, look at that color pop. Look at that shift. I didn't realize there was blue in that. So that's kind of where the fun in this look comes from, is where sure, depending on the angle, it can look very traditional, like a very subtle smoke or like a very subtle lilac-y smoke, but it's once you start to like turn and interact with it that it's like, ooh, that has a fun little twist to it. Okay, okay. So again, just making sure from a consistency standpoint that it's even on both sides. So now, because I tend to do mascara last, like dead last. So we're gonna do cheeks. With that, honestly, I only tend to use, or for this look, I only used 2 different shades. Both Cover FX matte bronzers. This one, the lighter one is Sun-Kissed, the darker one is Suntan. So, that's all I'm doing right now. First though, because again, I know my skin is going to be a little tacky from my foundation, one thing I do tend to do, any place that you're adding in powder over a liquid foundation, if it's still tacky, take a very light dusting of your setting powder and a light dusting of your setting powder and just go over the area that you're going to be powdering the most. So like for me, I know it's going to be jawline, I know it's going to be over cheekbones, and then temples and like kind of near my hairline. So like for the most part, I know where I'm doing it. And then have at it. So here is definitely the lighter of the 2 shades, and I'm just really starting to create the very subtle shadows. This is why I do 2 bronzing shades. I'm fair. I'm very fair. So like me going in with just 1 straight shade, I feel like is a little detrimental because I am so fair. But it also doesn't really do justice. So like I'm doing like very much like a base, so to speak, like a baseline of the blurring effect, I like to say. Kind of like creates a general shadow, and then I'm gonna go in with the darker shade and do more precise coverage. Okay, precise coverage. And for this, so I guess you could say this is kind of like minor contouring. Like I don't do contour hard, but I guess you could say that. So for this, I just want to really be emphasizing my cheekbones. I'm not trying to add like a whole lot of color, but I just want to emphasize my cheekbones to kind of like help like whatever the look. So so to do that, try to really focus on the cheekbone itself. Like you can even see the reflection off of the brush right there. So I try to follow that and don't go really past, like I always like to say like tip of the eyebrow, follow it down. Don't really put your bronzer, or like, I shouldn't say your bronzer, but your contour past that. Just a more natural look. That's the biggest thing. So, and another big thing is really like put it just underneath your actual bone. So like, I don't know if this is really going to show up much on camera, but like I'm not really hardcore doing this. I'm really just trying to capture the bottom of the bone and emphasize that, so that way it almost creates a more natural shadow. You see that? So like nothing, a little something. And so again, just really trying to get the emphasis of the bone structure more than anything else. Not trying to add a whole lot of like, oh my god, look at that color. Not trying to do that. Just trying to be like, oh, I like your cheekbones. Why, thank you. They're, you know, there. So even again with the idea of creating shadows, putting it into the temples, and I pull my hairline back because honestly, if you have light hair, like I have like medium-ish hair, it's like strawberry blonde, but just try to make sure you're getting into the base. Obviously, if you have blonde hair, you might want to have a little lighter hand just because it could impact the color of your roots, just with the color of your bronzer. But again, doing the same thing over here, emphasizing the bone more than anything else. Like in terms of like the application, it's literally, so like your cheekbone, kind of like where the hollow of your cheek starts and then above, I would say try to apply it like as much here to like this type of ridge as you can. I know it's like a really weird way to describe it. I don't really know how else to describe it, but definitely try and put it like just underneath, like have it almost like, have the product almost like grip that kind of edge to your bronzer, and it creates such a beautiful natural cheekbone. And then go up. So like make sure you're pressing up, because the last thing any of us want is droopy looking cheeks or droopy looking cheekbones. So just go up, and like very short, quick movements. Same thing up here, and then I just continue it up from, again, a consistency standpoint. And then one of the best tips that I've ever done / implemented, whatever, is really emphasizing your jawline. So again, emphasizing natural bone structure really just helps in terms of creating the shadow, creating your best self. I hate a lot of those terms, but it does really help emphasize and create more definition when you have it, but lighting, whatever, may not just actually pick it up. So this is really like forcing the lighting to pick it up. You're basically telling lighting what you do and don't want to show. So here we go. And then, again, I don't like doing true contour, but very light version of what I do is just really making sure you do it on the sides of your nose. Now I know a lot of folks might be like, but what about like actually snatching your nose and like truly doing like all of that? I'm like, to each their own. I personally don't like doing that. I also don't have exactly the best features for doing that. Sometimes, like I have a little bit of a wider bridge of a nose, and like if I try and snatch my nose, which I've tried, it has not turned out well. So to each their own. This is just what I like to do in terms of my makeup, because again, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not trying to get any type of specific look other than me. I mean, I just want to look like me, but with some fun makeup. So I might have a little more product there. Let's just even that out. Otherwise, we are going to be good to go for lips and mascara soon, guys. Oh, there we go. Girl, yes. Done. Okay. So, cheek products aside. Then we are gonna do lips. So for the lips, I kept it very natural, very, well, neutral, I should say. And what I've honestly been getting really into lately is lip pencils. So, I love how I did that there. Lip pencils. So in particular, I've been loving the Makeup Forever ones. They're super blendable. They take a hot minute to set, so you can have some time to actually work with them. And then on top of these, which I did with a brush, which I know is not like the typical way to apply, but is actually Jeffree Star's liquid lipstick in Posh Spice. So what I'm gonna do real quick is kind of, again, play with shadows and like the whole concept of contouring with lips, but really, really loosely. So even now, all I have on is just lip balm that I put on at the start of all of this. So all you're gonna do is really kind of like trace the shape of your lips. And don't worry if it's a little like, oh my god, what is that? It's really dark. Yeah, I know. The purpose of this color in particular is to actually create some shadow underneath your lip to make the illusion, literally the visual illusion of your lips being bigger. So probably should have a pencil sharpener here, but I don't. Anyway, so taking the darker shade, it's called Endless Cacao. So taking the Endless Cacao and just tracing the natural shape of your lips. Just sort of a very general shape. Because again, it's not really gonna matter. Like, this isn't like a very defined lip. Everything's gonna be very soft at the end. So you might be like, oh my god, girl, you look like such a 90s queen. Yeah, I'm aware. But that lip liner there is not gonna stay there. So again, just creating some shadow. And then here in the center, creating a literal highlight. So again, just trying it out. Now, this actually was really fun. I had not typically used a Jeffree Star color with a brush before. Normally I actually just use the doe foot applicator. And if you're familiar, you know this very well. This is his doe foot applicator. I mean, it literally is made to hug the lip. It's fantastic. But I didn't want it to have as defined of edges as I normally do with his items. I wanted it to have a more like soft look to it. So what I ended up doing was putting some of the doe foot applicator on from the doe foot applicator on the back of my hand, and then honestly using an eyeshadow brush. So I have a brush somewhere that is literally like, it's meant to do like the inner corner, but I loved how small it was. It was so easy just to like pick up the product and then literally paint it on. Like, it's so good, and it has like a buffing motion, so it's a really natural type of effect, versus the very like, oh, you're literally wearing a liquid lipstick kind of effect. Now you see, as I'm buffing it in, the lip line outer vanishing, which is okay, because again, you can always go back in with it, but I didn't want it to be super apparent that I was wearing lip liner, so I just wanted to act as a natural shadow. Much softer than original, right? Then, if you do want an actual gloss on top, because originally in my post I had done 2 different ways. So this was it, that was it. Literally, this is it without the gloss, and then with the gloss I had just used Marc Jacobs in, I think, Moonglow lip gloss in Enamored. So this is a beautiful, just sheer but non-shimmery type of nude. I'll put this one like truly at the end. I don't like to do gloss until after mascara, but I'll show you guys that as well. And now, mascara time. And for mascara, I tend to always use just Rimmel Scandaleyes. It's just really easy, it's accessible. It's by far one of my top favorite mascaras, I think since college maybe. It's just really big. It's just really big lashes, and I love a big mascara wand. So in terms of like the brush, so it just hit a lot of my personal things. Everybody has their own specifics that they tend to gravitate towards, but that was just one of my personal favorites for a long time. Now, the best way to not mess up an eyeshadow look once you've done it but haven't done mascara yet is when applying mascara, definitely look down. Obviously don't look down and then like forward, because then once you go forward, all of those tips are gonna touch your hard work. But have a mirror handy and then just be looking down and do it like this, honestly. This was a little bit of an adjustment to get used to a few years back, but it definitely has saved so many of my looks from getting tarnished by mascara, that definitely worth it. Try to get as far down to the root of the lash as possible. See the difference? Like, this just always blows my mind. Like, okay, so we got mascara eye, non-mascara eye. Look at the difference. It's nuts. Voila. Now, if you do want to actually do the gloss, a lot comes out on the little doe foot, so I would recommend taking some off. And then I honestly blotted a lot of those. So like starting in the middle, because that's really where you want the majority of the concentration of the gloss. Dab it to diffuse it outwards. And sure, you'll have to like get some of the outer ones, or outer corners, just to have a little bit more coverage, but that's it. There you have it, guys. Yeah, so that is everything. That is the smoky techno lavender look. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned some new things, and let me know if you'd like to see any other tutorials. I hope to see you next time. Thanks, guys.